Come on. There we go. Here we go. It is episode 8. Bet Parks presents Stick to Hockey Live. We've got a fun show today. It's a Friday. Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. And from Crossing Broadcast, from Snow the Goalie, we've not only got Anthony SanFilippo, we've also got Russ Joy, who sometimes I term as Russ Joy Less. But we'll get to them in a minute. Let me tell you about Bet Parks, because this is a great time, great weekend, great time of year. The confluence of all these sports happening at the same time. Baseball, you've got hockey, you've got college and pro football, you've got, you name it, F1 back this weekend in the U.S. at Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. You can bet it all on the Bet Parks app. So grab it, download it, easy to use, fast to use, faster to win than ever before. You're going to find that you can bet on everything and anything, from same-game parlays, live in-game betting, player performances, first to score, exact score, rushing yards, touchdown, you name it. It's all there for you. And right now, all Bet Parks users can use the promo code JASON750. That'll get you a risk-free bet up to $750. Again, for new and existing users. So, and terms and conditions do apply. So download the Bet Parks app today. You do need to be over 21 and present in Pennsylvania. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Also, Conquerville Subaru. I've been with Conquerville for decades, since '89 when I bought my first car there, and I've bought many cars since. Why? Conquerville cares. It's simple. They do great work in the community. First Subaru Nation Love Promise Dealer Award winner back in 2015. They continue to support 8 years now the Nemours Children's Hospital of Delaware. They've adopted 15 classrooms in Marcus Hook Elementary School, donating $500 for the teachers to buy classroom supplies. Plus, they continue the donation of thousands of coats for La Comunidad Hispania in Kennett Square. They've done that for a decade as well. It's a great time to visit the beautiful showroom on Route 202. Check out the inventory, pre-owned inventory, and a list of incoming Subaru vehicles. You're going to love it. Plus, it's more than a dealership. It's also a great service department with a free car wash with every visit. So visit ConquervilleSubaru.com. Check them out again on Route 202 in Glen Mills. And remember that Conquerville cares. All right, let's get to the boys now. From Crossing Broad, Snow the Goalie. We bring them both in. It is Anthony SanFilippo and Russ Joy. How you doing, boys?
Doing fantastic, Jason. Good to see your beautiful face today.
Doing great. I'm going to fix your ad read. La Comunidad Hispana. That's it. We're good.
Wait, give me that again?
La Comunidad Hispana. You don't pronounce the H. And don't make it Hispania. There's no tilde on the N. You know, that's...
La Comunidad
Española, whatever.
España.
It doesn't matter. It's not why we're here today. You know.
Right. I like that. Okay. I needed a little Spanish brusher up. The only Spanish I remember is from my honeymoon back in, God, what was it? 2005. I couldn't remember the year. Around this time of year, actually, we were trying to come back. I was stuck in Hurricane Wilma. And the only Spanish I remember from the trip is asking the people from the hotel when we were at the shelter, La comida esta noche? Like, are we going to have food tonight? Because they ran out of food. We were supposed to be there a day. 52 people in an elementary school classroom sleeping on pool mats. Sucked. Can't book my honeymoon, boys.
You made it.
Yeah. Well, you always wonder when you get married, when the shit hits the fan, how's your significant other going to react? I got to find out on the honeymoon. So,
did you have buyer's remorse immediately or not? Did she watch the show?
No, she was great.
Okay, well, there you go.
She's like, could be in an episode of Alone or like Survivor, you know.
Oh, good show.
She's a fire starter. Real quick, Ant, what's it been like covering the Phils? Because fuck, has that been fun?
It's been fun. I mean, that's the thing, Jay. I mean, that's
why we do this, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I've had a lot of fun covering the Flyers in 20 some years. I mean, we've had some great playoff runs, some really exciting times. It's just been that, you know, the Flyers have been mediocre to poor for a long time, and the Phillies have been pretty bad for a long time. So those are the two sports that I primarily write about. And, you know, so for the last decade, it's been kind of a lot of crap. And so to finally be able to get something that's fun and exciting and gets the fans excited and really generates a lot of conversation and, you know, positive conversation anyway, is good. It's fun. It's good to be down there. I'll be down there again this weekend, heading down today for game 3. I'll be at all 3 games for the NLCS. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a long series, a nail biter, going back to San Diego, but ultimately I think the Phillies are going to pull this one out and get to the World Series.
Oh, the tension in playoff baseball
Nothing like it.
Oh my God! Somebody gave me
the only
this.
thing close is overtime hockey in playoffs.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really the only thing that's close to it. Yes.
Everything is so consequential. Somebody used this parallel for baseball playoffs to me the other day. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was watching playoff baseball I forget what it is. I'll dig it up. But I want to ask you guys both this real quick, because that Phillies team, Ross, is like, they're really likable. You know, Harper came in. I thought he was a D-bag when he was in Washington. I'll be honest.
Okay.
Came here, he embraced it. I'm like, okay, is this genuine? He's proven it to be genuine, because it's been over time now, and really ingratiated himself into this community on so many levels. And then you got guys like Brandon Marsh. I mean, you've got so many likable guys. You know, Wheeler's a great pitcher, but a likable guy. And there's a lot of them on this team. Is that just because they're good and they're likable, or are they just likable, period? And the benefactor is that they're good.
Well, it's kind of like a secondary discovery if you're a fan, right? Because so many baseball fans, I think, had been turned off to the team, and you saw it throughout the summer that the attendance wasn't that great. And usually the response was, they've got to prove it. I don't want to, open myself up to getting hurt again. And so I think it's just kind of a confluence of a bunch of events. But like, one of them is you just have a group that seems to play for one another. They play hard for one another. You're getting contributions from up and down the lineup. And these guys are quirky and kind of weird and fun. And it doesn't hurt that, you got to see a little bit of the behind the scenes. You got the playlist. Kyle Pagan from Crossing Broad went and found, pulled up their Spotify playlist from the clubhouse after they beat the Cardinals. And they're just a fun group. I think Marsh, in a way, reminds you a little bit of being lanky and goofy, like a Jason Worth. They're not the same player, but like, there's a little bit of that flair. And then, I think you just got a group of guys. Like, I kind of was with you on Harper when he first came, and I was wondering how much of this is just like meaningless pandering. Is he authentic? It kind of feels like he really has, in a way, identified with the city. And that's another thing that just kind of plays into, I don't want to say the legend. It's too early for the legend, but like, this season, like, there's something about this team that feels right. And it might not have the entire season, but this postseason has been, I think, the closest to like the 08 team vibes as it's gotten.
Yeah, it really is. And, the playlist thing is great too. And the Dancing on My Own, the Callum Scott song, winner of the 2015 Britain's Got Talent. How you like that depth knowledge, Ant? That's pretty good, right?
That's good. Although it wasn't his originally.
No, it's what's her name? It's a female that sang it.
That's correct.
I forget her name off the top of my head. So my
Robin.
knowledge base. Robin. Yes, that's right. Let's get to the Flyers, because this is Stick to Hockey Live. It's not Stick to Phillies Live.
And
there's a lot to
good.
get.
The hockey
What's that?
Team. The hockey team has been good.
It's been enjoyable, right? They haven't been perfect, but the results, obviously, and I think like every time in Philadelphia, you can always identify with a team that battles. Like, that matters here more. Sometimes I think that's stupid that it matters here more than like it does, because ultimately it's pro sports. But Ant, they do battle. Like, even in the Florida game on a back-to-back, I was impressed how they battled back. They almost seem ignorant to the fact that you're not supposed to do that against, a team like Tampa and a team like Florida.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the more impressed with the comeback in the second period against Florida. I mean, obviously you come back and beat Tampa, you lose to Florida, but you get down 2-0 to Tampa early. You got the whole game to come back. You've had a couple days off. You still got your legs under you. You still feel like you can get back into that game. Plus, you got Carter Hart in goal, right? And Hart's been off to a really strong start for them. The comeback in Florida, you're down 2-0 the next night. You're back-to-back games. You got your backup goalie and Sandstrom going. It's easy for the mind to go, okay, this is not going to be our night.
Yeah, 5-1 loss.
It's easy for it to be, let's just shut it down and, we'll get back at it on Saturday in Nashville. And they didn't. And that's to their credit. And that to me is even more impressive. Yeah, they lose the game, but they got back into the game. They forced Florida to play in the third period where, years past, that's a cakewalk for Florida over the final 40. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't a perfect game, like you said. I mean, I don't think they've played a great game yet of the 4 games that they've played. There have been issues in each game. But at the same time, and Tortorella was really wise to point this out after the home opener. Hockey today is different. It's a lot about, there's a lot of mistakes that are happening. You may only play a good 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah, and get away with it.
But if you play hard and you stick to the game plan, even if you're only playing a good 35, 40 minutes, but you play hard against the other team, you're going to win more often than not.
Yeah.
And that's a real smart assessment of how the game has changed from what it used to be, because it used to be you couldn't half-ass it for 20 minutes and get away with a win. Nowadays you kind of can, and that's because the game has changed in such a way that you can just ramp it up and play at your best level and still beat a team as long as you've been playing them hard, even in those other minutes when you're not playing at your best.
See, the thing is, too, is it's so much about momentum. Like, you see momentum in hockey, I think, like basketball. Like in the NBA, you see momentum, and, does Doc Rivers call the timeout at the right time? Or do they do the right things to stave off momentum? And what do you do out of that timeout? And the momentum you're seeing, I think, in the NHL is more pronounced than ever because of forecheck systems and all that. And you just got to hope that when they have it, you're just in your structure and you keep them to the outside, and whatever you give up is not that detrimental. But the thing is, one thing that Tort said, and I've never heard a coach say this, and I absolutely loved it, is this is a find a way league, Russ. Find a way to get a win. It doesn't matter. They've gotten these wins, I think, because of individual performances and much better structure, especially in the neutral and D zone. But the find a way league can only take you so far because they are bereft of high-end talent.
They are. It's probably important to kind of note, how they got these wins and the teams that they picked them up against as well, right? Like, context is king in this situation. And it kind of goes without saying, but just in case it does need to be said, this team came in better shape than pretty much any other team they've had to play to this point in the season because of the John Tortorella training camp. And so there's a line of thinking that if you had run into these 4 teams mid-season, do you walk away with a 3-1-0 record? Maybe. It's possible. Devils aren't exactly very good. Vancouver hasn't won a game this year. Tampa, you would assume you'd probably lose to once they've kind of hit their groove. I think that what you're seeing is a team that is afraid of their coach, which is probably a good thing, and a team that's better conditioned, and also a team that entered the season as one of the worst rosters probably in hockey, whether it's injuries or just the way that the team was constructed. And if you're an opposing team, you're probably going to look at this as an easy game, a blow-off game. And if you don't take this team seriously and you see the way that they're busting it now, you're entirely, within the realm of getting upset and within the realm of having a turnover end up in the back of your net, like what happened with Noah Cates' goal. So I think that's what you're seeing. And they, to their credit, they're a scrappy team, and they have found a way to win 3 games to start the year.
The thing is Torts actually backed off on a lot of his conditioning stuff too, because the team was so nicked up. And he said that when he met with us one night before one of the games, I had to back off because I just didn't want more guys to get taxed and then possibly get nicked up, because at this point I can't even field my dress rehearsal squad for that final preseason game. So, I mean, guys came in really good condition as well. And I think I agree with you, Russ. The thing is, it's human nature, like to say, well, every NHL team, they're pros, they take on the opposite. Bullshit. They don't take on the opposition. They go, tonight's a little bit easier of a night. That's the reputation the Flyers have. But how long does it take for it to kind of go through the league to go, hey, when you play the Flyers, you got to bear down because they're going to work their bag off?
I think once you get, I think you got to go about, 10, 12 games into the season, really kind of get the sense that, because I think a lot of teams look at those first 10, 12 games almost like an extended preseason in a lot of ways. Like they're still trying to get their bodies into the right shape for the long haul. And I think after that, I think that then they're feeling like, okay, we're in real season mode now, and you're going up against, or we should dominate the Flyers. You go out there, and the Flyers play you hard, and they hit, and they make it a tough game, and you're a little sore after playing them, even if you win the game, and then that's when it's going to start spreading around. Like, yeah, this team's not as much of a pushover as you think they're going to be. So I really think it takes about that long, and that's another 2 weeks. And that's okay. I mean, Flyers can take advantage of it in the short term if they have the opportunity. Will they? I don't know. I still look at the roster and I compare them against some of the better teams that they're going to be playing here coming up. I mean, I know Nashville's not necessarily one of them, and San Jose was off to a terrible start. Although, man, they beat the Rangers. I can't believe that.
Yeah.
But
OT.
you look coming up, and you got the Carolina, and you got Dallas. And you got some tough teams coming in.
Rangers,
the
Rangers.
New
New York and Toronto and Ottawa.
Yeah, all three of them on that trip, right?
St. Louis,
And so you start to wonder how much can they do this on a night in, night out basis and still come out ahead against all those teams who are on paper not just a little bit better than the Flyers, a lot better than the Flyers. And that's where I say I don't know if they can, but that's not a bad thing. They can do this, Jay. They can play those games, maybe not win them, or maybe win just a few, but lose a bunch. But if they play the right way and play hard, I think that there's still a benefit for this team moving forward.
Yeah, because that's a mentality. I had to pop Russ off real quick here to just run off for a second. We'll bring him back in just a second, and we'll get to the business. I know a lot of people are hanging on for us to debate his tweet from the other day that I lambasted him on, and then he responded on Snow the goalie. Yeah, I agree. Like, having that work ethic and standard and culture, like those are fun words, right? Yeah. We write about them, we talk about them, but they don't mean shit unless they're religion. And that's one thing about Torts that. It's not just a word. It's not just a catchphrase. And it's not when he feels like enforcing accountability or enforcing, all the culture and standard and all that stuff. That's all the time with him. Real quick, before we get to Russ's tweet, and what did you think, when Torts came, we had this impression of him from afar. And I found him to be, he hasn't gone to DEFCON 5 just yet. He hasn't gone, get me Sack on the line, take me down to DEFCON. He hasn't gone there yet. Right. He hasn't had to. But away from press conferences and everything else, I have found a very chill, mellow dude, and I was surprised. Intense, but chill.
Yeah. And that's a good thing. But it's his normal, like what we're expecting, like the big angry Torts, the blow up Torts, that guy. It's coming out in honesty instead right now. Like he will tell you if a player is not playing well. He will tell you if he needs to see more out of a guy. Like he has no problem saying that publicly. And I think that is his way of, for now, that is his way of being Torts without being, over the top, yelling and screaming at everybody, the DEFCON 5 guy that you're talking about. I think we're going to get to DEFCON 5 at some point. It's just a matter of time. I mean, he's a leopard doesn't change its spots, right? I mean, he's going to be that guy. But at the same time, I appreciate what he's doing. And I think that everything is calculated. Like we talked about this on Snow the goalie. How calculated is it that Scott Lawton is this guy that comes out wearing the A and nobody else?
Yeah.
What is that? What message is that sending Kevin Hayes? What message is that sending Provorov, who wore A's here last year? Like, what message is that sending?
He said yesterday on the radio that he's not going to name a captain all year.
And that's fine. He doesn't have to. Good. He doesn't have to. But the point is what does it say to guys who assume they're part of the leadership group that they can't also wear a letter on the ice?
And that Lotz is the only one with a letter.
Yes.
Makes him look like the teacher's pet a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, it may be, but you know what, though? We talked a little bit about this last year, about how I mean, Couturier's probably the guy, but if you really wanted to go with a more heart and soul kind of player, then Lawton would be the player that you would go with.
Yeah.
So I mean,
you and I
think,
talked about it in the press box 100 times last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a crazy thing to think of Lawton as a potential captain. So I like that Tortorella's doing this, and I like that he's sending messages this way. He does it through the media. He does it subtly, and what he's doing right now, he's pushing the right buttons. He's coaching the team the right way. But do I think it's going to last like this the whole season? No, he's going to have one of his blow-ups at some point.
Yeah, that's my thing. Just enjoy kind of this time because misery is going to happen in any NHL season, and when you're devoid of that high-end talent, it's the law of averages. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Which brings us to Russ's tweet, which I melted down on the other day on the show with Anthony DeMarco. All these damn Anthonys. And Russ, I will tell you that the biggest issue I have with the tweet, so I'll read it real quick. This was at 9:43 on October 18th. So what was October 18th? 3 days ago, Tuesday, right?
Sure was.
And it was after so it's after the Flyers beat Tampa. And you said the Flyers are 3-0 in a season where the objective was to lose. Can't make this up. Kind of knew the Torch training camp would have them better conditioned than the opposition, but the young guys are really stepping up. # fueled by Philly. The part that irritates me, even today, 3 days later, is that in a season where the objective was to lose, because to me, the objective can never be to lose. And going into this season, I think we knew that wasn't the objective because the minute you hired Torts, there's no way the objective was to lose. So kind of explain that to me.
Yeah. If you're still upset about the tweet 3 days later, I don't have to tell you, man.
I don't have shit going on.
If you're scared, get a dog.
I got one.
There are a few different lines of thinking. I think like the surface way to read it is the wrong one. And I said to Ant yesterday on Snow the Goalie that like there probably should have been a should have in there, should have been to lose, which I've been very consistent about for months now. I think probably for even over a year, I've been consistent in this thought, this line of thinking, that the only way to break out of mediocrity, which is where we've been for a decade, is to go one of two ways. And this front office has proven incapable of going the way of building a contending team and a meaningful roster, or one that can actually contend and make a deep playoff run. They don't have it. It's a team that came into this as arguably like a bottom 7 roster in the league, if you want to be really generous, and they had no cap space to start the year. That shouldn't happen. Like that kind of thing can't happen. And so I look at it and I say, all right, objective should be to lose. I look at their offseason. You had one cheat code. You had Johnny Gaudreau out there. You chose not to go that route. That's fine. You chose to hang on to James Van Riemsdyk into the offseason, presumably thinking that someone would be willing to play ball. Chuck Fletcher supposedly has gravitas with other GMs in the league. Somebody would probably be willing to take that contract for 1 year. James Van Riemsdyk's not a bad guy. He's been a player rep for the Players Association, not a locker room cancer. Totally fine, decent dude, can pot 20 goals, maybe more, show up on the power play. Couldn't move him. It's just, I look at it and I say, the objective here should have been to lose. And you're right. When you bring in John Tortorella, conceptually, he raises your floor. So you almost screw yourself out of getting into the range of a top 3 pick if you're going to go that way. But if you're going to do that, then why didn't you make a move for Johnny Gaudreau? There's cognitive dissonance. You can't say we're willing to raise our floor with the coach, but it's not time yet to go out and acquire somebody who can help us in some way, shape, or form in terms of putting up points. And the surface level way that I think a lot of people tried to read that tweet was, oh, Russ thinks these guys should go out and intentionally lose. Like John Tortorella should go out and tell these guys, hey guys, we're up 2-1 in the third period. Somebody
turn it
kick
over
the puck in the net.
Yeah.
And no, that's not the point. But I think if you read it like that, I don't know. If you read that, I'm not saying you, although maybe you, I think that if you read that statement and you think that I, of all people, am saying that a player should go out and intentionally tank a game, then I think you're adult. You said some very colorful language on your show.
Oh, I tend to.
I think that there is no way to say that the objective this year was to win, because you didn't field a team that can win over an 82-game season. And so if you don't field a competitive team, one that relative to the rest of the league is a team that can contend in some meaningful way, if you don't do that, then your objective is not to win. Your objective might be to do a fact-finding mission for a season, but it's not to win. It's not to make the playoffs. It's not to try to contend for a Stanley Cup, because you didn't put your team in position to do that as a front office. The coach is going to go out and try to lead the guys to wins. Those guys are going to go out and bust their asses to try to win. But the objective can't be to win this year. It just can't be.
Would their actions, though, be more indicative of what their true intention is by not signing Gaudreau, by not trading for DeBrincat and those things? Go ahead.
Let me answer that, because I don't know what their intentions are, Jason. I've been firm with this all summer long. I like you sometimes feel that Russ's takes are a little bit on the hotter side. But in this one, I don't necessarily disagree with him. Yes, he could have worded it maybe slightly differently, but I knew what he was saying, because the team objective, not the players, not the coach, but the team objective, organizationally,
yep.
We didn't know what we really didn't know what their objective was, because it changed so many times.
Yeah,
they went from, we're going to hire a coach like Tortorella, that tells me that you want to win right away, to we're going to do an aggressive retool, that tells me you want to win right away. You do.
That was in January, though. Like, we got to let that go at some point.
But the point is that
because he had multiple opportunities. This is where I go nuts, because Chuck Fletcher had multiple opportunities from January on, and as things changed in real time, to walk that back definitively and to say, things changed. We intended on doing an aggressive retool.
Right.
We were unable to move contracts. We were unable to do X, Y, Z. And because of that, we've had to recalibrate. And that's where I get pissed off, because it was dishonest and disingenuous to the fan base. And now go ahead, Amp. But
I agree with that.
I can't let that go, because the guy in charge of hockey ops refuses to take any responsibility and refuses to acknowledge that maybe he didn't do a great job, or maybe things changed. But you've got to be forthright with your fan base. Otherwise, I don't know what we're doing here.
I think Chuck's also trying to play both sides of this, even up through training camp, Jay. I mean, he sits there in camp and he wants to remind us that, hey, we're going to have a really young team. We're going to have all these young guys playing. So
exciting,
whatever.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Exciting, but at the same time, which is exciting for us as we look forward to the future of the franchise. But at the same time, he says, we're going out there to look forward to prove everybody wrong. Well, what is it?
Well, you got to say that, though. I mean,
no, you don't.
Well, but you got to one or the other, though.
Yeah,
it's
you do.
One of the, and that's where I think.
No, wait, hold on, pause.
That's a player mentality. Like, you got to stand as a GM. You got to stand behind your players. You got to stand behind them and say, hey, they want them to go out there and prove people wrong. Guys like Travis Konechny and Provorov and raise their value, whether they're here long term or not. See, the notion too that Torts was going to come in and push them for a playoff spot. If you look at his history, year one, that's not what he does.
Right, exactly.
It's not. He goes in and he assesses, and then he builds something that can be sustainable everywhere he's gone, with the exception of Vancouver, because that was 1 year. In year one of his full season, he did not make the playoffs. And then beyond that, he had a minimum of 4 straight years in the playoffs at every location. And with an arc, obviously in Tampa in year 3, I guess technically year 4, because he came in as a midseason replacement, he won a cup. In New York, he got to a conference final. I think it was in year 3. And then obviously in Columbus, he won the 1 round of playoffs in the bubble and then eventually walked away. But see, I don't think that intention was there. I think the intention when you hired Torts was to get the culture and standard turned around. I think I never listen to what GMs and coaches say sometimes, because it doesn't matter. What matters is their actions. I read their actions, not their words. Is what I'm saying.
And that's fair. And that's fair. Hold on a second. Tickets are coming up. The fans listen.
Yeah,
and when fans are told,
I get that. Yeah, you're right about that.
But here's the elephant in the room, and I know that Chuck tried to downplay it. I know Chuck brought it up himself after the hiring of Tortorella in a press conference, because nobody asked him. He felt the need to say it. Okay, but I know for a fact, because it was my report, that he did not want John Tortorella to be the coach of this team. It was not his choice. This was a choice that came from above him and around him, and was not his first choice. Not to say that he didn't want to hire Tortorella, period, but Tortorella was not his top choice. Wasn't his
top choice was probably Trotz, correct?
Okay. Barry Trotz was certainly his first choice.
Yeah.
Point is that when you have that, and when you have all of these things and you kind of look at it, and for them to sit there and say, we were never in on Gaudreau, and I have people who are very close to Johnny who told me they were talking with the Flyers at length. So you're lying to the public again there. They were in on Gaudreau. They just didn't want to. At one point, they decided that it was better to not go that route, and maybe that was better for the team ultimately. But they were to sit there and say we were never in on him is, again, BS. They were in on him. They were in on Johnny Gaudreau. 100%. They were talking to his camp. I promise you this. It's why Gaudreau waited. It's why he waited. He was waiting for a response from the Flyers.
He didn't sign in Columbus till about 5:00 that night.
Yes. Yeah. It's why he waited. So, I get a sense that our GM is very disingenuous with the media, and in turns is disingenuous with the fan base. And so therefore we don't know what we're supposed to believe from him as what the direction of the team is, or what our goals are, or what our objectives are. So in essence, we have to kind of create our own. And I think Russ kind of looks at it and says, let's look at this roster on paper. Let's see what this roster looks like. It's not a playoff contending roster. If it does well and it overachieves, that's great on the coach because it gets us that much closer to being a good team next season. But at the same time, we can't expect great things from this roster as it's constructed. So, and we're about to enter a draft with at least 2, maybe 3 generational talents at the top of it. So maybe the objective is to try not to be a playoff team and see if we can land one of those guys to help further. Because look, they're very high on Cutter Gauthier, right? We think that he's going to be – Boston College is playing him as their top-line center, and he was being scouted by most people as a winger, freshman. And the Flyers were smart enough to say, hey, what about if this kid is a center, right? So there's a lot to like there, and there's a lot to like with some of the drafts. Chuck and his team have done a nice job, I think, in the drafts. There's a lot of good young players getting ready to come into this organization.
There's NHL guys that'll play in the NHL, but there's no bona fide difference. Maybe Gauthier is.
Gauthier
a guy you can throw over the boards that the other team goes, oh shit, he's on the ice.
Right,
like
exactly.
You need those guys.
But if you have the opportunity to get one of those guys in the draft, and then you have a kid like Gauthier coming who could be like a really good second banana, and then you start clearing out some of these contracts, and the team has at least shown some signs of moving forward under this coach. Well, guess what? Then your rebuild is a quick rebuild, which is
it got a shot of adrenaline.
Right. It's far more what I prefer. Let's do it in 2 to 3 seasons as opposed to the long range, tear it all down, blow it all up, and take 8 years before you're good again. That. So this is my way of rebuilding. And if it works, credit to them. But come out and say that's what you're doing. That's what I have. That's my biggest beef.
The mixed messaging is your biggest issue. And there has been very mixed messaging.
And I think that's what Russ is kind of going. It's like, so if I don't have a message I can trust, I need to create my own. And in that sense, I'd rather they not be a mediocre team this year. I'd rather they be toward the bottom so that they have a chance to get one of those generational players and expedite this rebuild.
Yeah. Russ, where you and I agree, and I listened to Snow the Goalie yesterday. I actually watched it on your YouTube channel, by the way. So check that out. You and I agree. Like, do I want Connor Bedard? Oh my God. Yeah.
Anybody should. Yeah.
Oh God, he's incredible. Connor Bedard makes me, Ant, and you more money, frankly, because the minute you drafted a player like that, the team jumps to a different level. Do you got to run, Ant?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, he's got to go cover the Phillies, so we'll let you go. We'll keep Russ. Russ, you good?
This guy.
You're losing your buffer.
I actually have something I have to do for my other job before I go cover the Phillies. But the thing is with the Phillies, now that Major League Baseball is running things, they've make it that much harder to get into the damn building.
Oh, yeah.
The Phillies were like, yeah, no problem. Just typical last round, normal process. walk in your normal media entrance, go in, get your credential,
Yeah,
go
league
upstairs,
takes over,
everything's fine.
DNA sample.
It's unbelievable.
Yep.
The back and forth. You park on one side of the building, you got to walk all the way around to the other side to get your credential and proof of everything, and then you got to go back, and then they're going to scan everything. It's going to take 2 hours just to get into the building today.
Oh my God! Well,
it's a nightmare.
Go enjoy it though. It'll be a wild atmosphere.
It'll be a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll let Ant go. And Russ, are you good for a bit?
I'm great.
You got nothing but time.
I've got an ever-growing list of things to write and edit, but I am here for you.
Okay, we'll just take a few more minutes. But where you and I, like, I want a Bedard. I want to be in that position. You know, the lottery is such a crapshoot because of the reform and the odds and everything like that. Finishing last doesn't really mean much. I mean, go back to 2017, right? Colorado is the worst team in the league by 40 standings points, and they end up drafting 4th. And at the time, they were furious. Like, what else do we have to do? First of all, how'd they finish that bad with McKinnon and Landeskog and everything they had? They draft 4th, and boom, they get Makar. What? Just a stroke of genius, and they're off and running. But, you know, like, I think when it's all said and done this season, I mean, we're only, 4 games in, you know, things are going to balance out. My point is, I think you got to enjoy when things are going well, because if them winning makes you miserable in a season where there's going to be a lot of losing, you're going to tie yourself in mental knots and go crazy.
I guess. I don't know.
Not you, I guess.
I don't sit down and like watch a Flyers game and actively root for them to lose. It's not my DNA. Like, I don't know who could do that, but from a macro level, you at some point have to kind of sit back and say, what's the best thing for this team? And what's the best thing for my fandom? And it should be to break out of the perpetual cycle of, you know, hockey purgatory.
Big picture, long term is what you're talking about.
Yeah, you have to zoom out for a second. You know, like if you go into everything at the most micro level, like if you're living and dying with every line change, I mean, you're gonna lose your mind. You know, if you go into every game with your heart and soul, and like you certainly can, and like, you know, for the people who are only hockey fans, who are only Flyers fans, like, I get it. You'd be diametrically opposed to wanting to see the team lose because it's your only thing. It's the only thing you care about in the sports world. But if you're like a multi-sport fan, you have other outlets. You know, you have other teams that you can cheer for. You know, you can throw yourself into the Phillies run. You can throw yourself into the Eastern Conference final with the Union next week. You can decide to like smash your head through a cinder block while watching Doc Rivers continue to fail to make adjustments with the Sixers. Like, you can do that, I guess. But like, I can't sit down and say, I want this team to lose as I'm watching the game. But conceptually, the best thing for them is to lose. And like the biggest counter, and you kind of mentioned it, you know, it's like what, a 15% chance if you have the worst record in the league of getting the number 1 pick. And so like the nonsense that I see is, well, even if you have the worst record, you only have a 15% chance. Okay, that's true. But conceptually, if your idea is to try to get one of these top 2 or 3 guys in the draft, you have to do something to put yourself in position for that. You can't just say, well, you know what, I want to go out and watch, you know, Morgan Frost take that next step. And if that means that the Flyers finish with the 8th worst record instead of the 5th worst record, it was worth it. Like, I don't agree with that. I think that's kind of silly. But, you know, if you look at it, and what I said yesterday on Snow the Goalie with Ant was, look, if this team overachieves in a big way, and I mean like a big way, where they're a quasi-bubble playoff team, and they overachieved in a way that is sustainable over time. You watch Morgan Frost take the next step. You watch Wade Allison take the next step. Hopefully Joel Farabee gets healthy. I don't think he's right now.
No, he's fighting the puck.
You know, if he continues, you know, he takes some time maybe, and then comes back and gets off to the right step. And you get a bunch of these young guys playing the right way. If they all overachieve together, then that is the best outcome, because that would indicate that perhaps those guys have something in them that we didn't see. And if it's sustainable for a period of time, it's not an anomaly, then by all means, like, that's the best thing for the franchise going forward. I just don't think that that's where they're at. Now, if we get 40, 50 games into the season and I'm very wrong, like, I will gladly eat crow about it. Like, I will. But I don't foresee it. And if this team ends up being a sort of bubble team on the back of like Kevin Hayes and James Van Riemsdyk, that's the worst thing that could happen. Because
'Cause
at
of
that
the
point, your
veteran
young
core.
guys haven't taken that step forward. It's a
Mhm.
bunch of aging or expensive vets that really shouldn't have much of a future with the team. Hayes will, just because his contract's an albatross. But like, it should be the young guys. If the young guys overachieve, awesome. You won't hear a complaint from me. And if they lose, by the way, you won't hear me railing against them for losing.
See,
I will rail against them if their work ethic
actually,
is bad.
this is gonna be weird, but I actually disagree in a way.
Okay.
I think it's good, yeah, the young players develop, and some of them are going to, and inherently some aren't. That's just the way it is, right? And it would be great, but I no matter what, even if those young players develop, they're still not high end, top line threat to score on individual effort at any time. You still won't have that. It'll be good because we've rounded out our roster, but you're still missing the crown jewel of the face you can put on the marquee. I mean, I think it's important for guys like Konechny and Provorov to really get the arc of their NHL mid-career development going in the right direction. Konechny's off to a great start. I think Provorov is too. But where does that go long term? I mean, like I'm totally with you on the end game, and we'll see where the lottery balls fall and all that stuff. And I still think that they'll be in a position. I haven't changed my expectation based on these 4 games in any way, shape, or form. Have you changed your expectation for the entire 82 based on this? I mean, to me, it's just a start that happened. There's a lot of factors that go into it. A team that is trying to prove people wrong, a team that is well conditioned, is well coached, and seems to have better structure. And look, a lot of it's on the back of the goaltender too. Although I did a breakdown today on Flyers Daily. It's odd. Carter in his first 10 games of seasons, generally speaking, hasn't had a start like this. Has had one other really good start, but save percentage hasn't really kind of been an indicating factor on team success, which is odd. But I was kind of shocked by that. But overall, I think everything kind of settles where it's going to settle, because 82, like a baseball season, you are what you are. Yeah. Because there's a lot of sample size. Like we tend to look at this, Russ, a lot of times like an Eagles team, 16 games back in the day, right? And you live and die by each one. You just can't attack an 82 game season with that mentality, because you'll spin yourself in knots.
Yeah. I mean, if you go down to a game, cheer for the team to win, enjoy yourself, have fun.
You want to be entertained. I mean, that's what this is.
You should. I mean, if you decide to go down and spend money on this team, I mean, you can certainly do that. I wouldn't, but like you could. And if you do, like, I hope that the team wins. Like, I hope you have a great time. But, at some point you have to be willing to suffer a little bit as a fan if it means that the team is going to be better. And if you were to get a Bedard, it fundamentally alters the future of your team. It fundamentally changes the entire trajectory of what this team could be. Because then, as you kind of mentioned before, Bedard comes here, or one of the other 2 highly touted prospects come here.
Fantilli or Michkov.
Yeah, like you get one of those guys, all of a sudden, James Van Riemsdyk, $7 million comes off the books. You start to get a little bit creative. Ivan Provorov's name probably pops up in trade rumors. Probably get a nice little return for Provorov. You also get out of the $6 million he's owed. At that point, now you have some flexibility. My problem is, I still cannot understand why the GM is in place, and I still, under no circumstances, would give him another trade deadline in another offseason. But for whatever reason, this organization seems content with him pulling the strings. He has done nothing, and I mean nothing, to inspire hope for what he can do as a leader of a team, as a constructor of a team. I genuinely do not understand what the organization sees in him. If you end up in a situation where you get to draft anywhere near the top of the lottery, I would certainly hope that you would make a wholesale change in the front office and allow a new voice, a new vision to lead this team into the next era of what Flyers hockey is going to be. Because otherwise, it's really hard to go into an offseason expecting anything of significance to happen. Just where I'm at.
I mean, if you look at this draft in particular, if you're at the very top of it, it's kind of a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
Where you're going. I mean, if you're in the top 3, you're taking Bedard, and then it's Fantilli probably second at this point. We'll see if that changes. I think their drafting has been fine. They just haven't drafted high enough. And how much do you put on Ron Hextall? Because so much of what this team is right now, to me, is a direct result not only of Hexy, but a result of Nolan Patrick in particular.
Sure.
I mean, that's the colossal. I mean, like all tentacles lead to Nolan Patrick. You know, Kevin Hayes is here because Nolan Patrick couldn't answer the bell. They knew he was out for that season. And, you know, that's a big factor.
It is. I put a decent chunk of putting too much stock into specific players as being game changers or of being core pieces of the team on Ron Hextall. But I would argue that the longer term damage that's been done has been done under Chuck Fletcher, who continues to hand out no movement clauses, modified no movement clauses to players that don't either deserve it or haven't ceded at least some AAV in exchange. I think Travis Sanheim's a nice player. I think 8 years is absurd. Once the cap goes up, it's going to be a decent deal. I don't think it's a bad deal. I like Travis Sanheim as a player. But like the Nick Delorier signing, silly.
Too much term.
And also a no movement clause. Like
it's
funny because when you hear, and it even happened on opening night, you heard, well, there aren't a lot of players like Nick Delorier in this league. Well, there's a reason for that. And just the idea that like there was a market for Nick Delorier and that's why you had to give him a no movement clause is silly at best.
Well, I will tell you that the reason why Nick Delorier is here is not because of the GM. Okay. It's the coach. The coach wanted him. I'm shocked that when I saw 4 years, Russ, and a modified no move, I was like, huh? Why? Because it's insane. A very difficult contract to then move at a deadline. He's a player that teams would like for the old sandpaper in the playoffs. But at 4 years, that's not in the cards.
That again is where you come back to like, what is this team? This is like the lack of vision thing, right? Because that's a piece that maybe you add to a playoff roster, right? To one that expects to make a playoff run.
Yeah, Torts is really bullish on him. That's a head coach move right there.
Yeah,
this is a guy I need. Go get him.
It's just you see the number of contracts that have been given out. You see the length. You see the term. I just don't get it. That's where I'm at. And the cap. He has fundamentally put the team in cap hell.
Yeah.
So even if this organization were to move on from him, like say over the next 30 games, the wheels fall off and Spectacor believes that this is finally the moment that they can make a change, which would probably just be to internally promote Danny Briere. Let's hope he's ready. If they did that, the next guy who comes in is going to have to really work some magic, is really going to have to pull on some favors, right? Is going to hopefully have some gravitas, like meaningful gravitas with their colleagues to get themselves out of some of these deals. That's the part that scares me. Hextall was a buffoon to some extent. Wasn't as good of a drafter as maybe people thought he was at the time. Perhaps put too much stock into the Ivan Provorovs and Travis Konechny's of the world. But he didn't put the team, to my knowledge, unless I'm missing something, into like a 6-year cap hell.
Did sign JVR,
which is about to come off the books.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, like, even though he is not a top end player, again, can still net you 20 goals, has value probably to a playoff team, potentially, as somebody who could score lower in the lineup.
Helps a power play for sure.
Yeah. So,
the last thing, I look at it and the perception when a team has had the past 2 years like they've had, miserable, just fucking miserable seasons, right? And we keep seeing contracts being handed out. That's from an optics standpoint. You go, wait a minute, why are you tying guys up when you've had miserable seasons?
Yeah,
that, and I agree with you. That's an optics thing that, like, you can look at each individual deal and feel the way you feel about it. Like Farabee made sense. He's coming off an ELC. Carter Hart made sense coming off an ELC. All those things. But you
Couturier
see Sanheim going...
Couturier at the AAV in a vacuum made sense, except you look at the miles, the wear and tear, the lack of tread left on the tire kind of thing, right? Like he came into the league super young. Like
Yeah, 18.
Just basic logic would probably tell you that like the term on that one's going to be really brutal, and that you would hope you can get through the first half of that deal with him being able to, be held together with more than paper clips and tape, and so a lot of
Yeah,
these
term
moves,
has been like the ultimate thing players want now, more than
yeah.
anything. They'll drop the
But
AAV just for term.
And here's the thing, though: if term is the thing that players want, and you're willing to give term, like use Sanheim as an example, that AAV in a vacuum, if it were a 4 or 5 year deal, would be totally fine. But over 8 years, even if we say the cap's going to go up, there should have been a concession. Like, I think a good GM probably works out whether it's a bloated second half of the deal when the cap is expected to go up, but give themselves $1 million, $1.5 million wiggle room over the next 2 to 3 years while we wait for that cap to expand. Like, there needs to be a concession.
More
on the other
foresight
side.
is what you're saying.
Yeah. Do you say foresight?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing Chuck Fletcher doesn't have. So I just come back to it. It's just like, I hate to drone on about it, but like, what has he done to instill confidence in a fan base?
Yeah.
Like what's
especially coming off the last couple of years ago, you're re-signing guys that went through that. So why not make change? Not change for the sake of change, but yeah.
If you build a championship team in any sport, your general manager has to be elite at least one facet of their job: drafting, free agency, trades. Howie Roseman, historically not a great drafter, better of late. Historically wasn't great, would win every trade he made. You cannot have a GM in place who is mediocre at best in multiple of those facets. Chuck Fletcher does not win trades. His drafting maybe is okay, though probably a wasted second round pick. Free agency, not ideal. I think that at some point the team just kind of has to say, you know what? Even if you like the guy, it's probably best to move separate ways, because there is, unfortunately for him, a bit of a black cloud that looms overhead. He's been here and overseen multiple years of bad teams and given out some questionable contracts.
Yeah, like you look at the Ristolainen deal up against the deadline. They extend him. I like Ristolainen. I think he's got value. I know the analytics community hates him, but I think he does provide something, even though he hasn't played this year. But to me, I probably would have moved him at the deadline and recouped something. You can always sign him in the offseason. Like, there's no rule against signing him again in the offseason. The only one I would not have moved at a deadline would have been Lawton, because the cost per replacement for what he brings on and off the ice, I think was I think you got a deal for what you get in total package with him.
Yeah, I mean, we had Fletcher on Snow the Goalie a year and a half ago, whenever it was that he signed Lawton. And his rationale, this is one that I give him that was solid. The rationale was not re-signing Scott Lawton meant that we were either going to have to use draft capital in a trade to acquire another guy who's like Scott Lawton, or go out in free agency and probably spend more money on another guy who is like Scott Lawton. I have no problem with it. Scott Lawton is a good player. He's a good locker room guy. He's respected. He's scrappy. I like him. I like him as a player. I think he's a good player. I think he's totally fine if you want to strap put the C on him next season. No issues. But it almost feels like that's the anomaly, right? Like, when you can just point to one move and the rest you just go, man, I don't know. I don't know what we're doing here. I don't know what the vision was. That's the problem. Is it feels like a perpetual state of self-preservation. And you cannot build a championship contender when your GM is in a constant state of self-preservation. It just doesn't work. It never will.
Yeah, I see some of the other, like a Bill Zito or Kent Hughes in Montreal, and it's interesting because they come from an agent background, how they do things with, Zito obviously took over a different situation down there, but in Florida, but in Montreal, I'll be interested to see how Kent Hughes handles that situation up there. I think the agent thing, is something that you could see happening more and more, because nobody knows the market better than agents. They don't. Yeah. So I think that's a huge asset in, roster construction. So, Russ, this was fun. Thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. I land-basted you the other day. You came on and we discussed it. And I think even though we don't agree on all elements, and I still hate that wording of where the objective was to lose. And had you put should have in there, okay. I probably wouldn't have freaked out, but you know me, I'm an emotional prick.
You're emotional. I don't know if I'd say you're a prick. I would say that you're emotional.
Did you see my new Twitter avatar?
The gnome. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I heard you say I was listening in the car, and you called me a garden gnome, and I'm like,
I said resident
I have
garden
a Flyers
gnome.
garden gnome.
I said resident garden gnome. Jason
Yes.
Myrtetus text then.
I kind of think
it's
that's
great.
compliment.
If you want, we can Photoshop your face on there. I think it'd be great. Keep it up there for a while. That can be like the positivity gnome. That's the Posidelphia gnome.
Yeah, that thing's looking a little weathered out there. You know, I got too many years tied up in contract to that garden gnome. I don't even know where I got the damn thing.
I mean, in fairness, you did say before we came on, you know, the eyesight's starting to go, getting a little bit older. I mean, one could argue that lawn gnome is kind of a microcosm of where you're at in life, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Where I'm at or the team's at?
I don't know. Probably all of the above. If they do what they've done the last few years for a few more, that beard is going to be fully gray, and I don't know. I don't know where the Stick to Hockey podcast is going to be at that point. You're going to come on here with Coke bottle glasses and
Stick to Hockey Live.
So.
Hey, thanks for doing this. People can get all your stuff. Tell people where they can follow you and get all the pertinent information.
You can follow the show Snow the Goalie on Twitter and Instagram at Snow the Goalie, Facebook.com/Snow the Goalie. You can go to snowthegoalie.com, which is like a very wonderful little site thing I set up. It doesn't.
I didn't even know you had that. All right.
I did it. I did it one night. I was bored. It was like 2 a.m. I was writing sports betting stuff, and I said, I'm just going to buy the domain and let's have some fun. So that's there. New episodes every week. We're on the Crossing Broad YouTube channel. If you want to watch, if you want to look into the eyes of Anthony SanFilippo as he's talking, if you want to, smile along with Bundy as I make a goofy point, you can certainly do that. That's all the places that you can find it. And anywhere, your favorite podcast app, we're there.
There you go. Check it out. Appreciate you doing this, man. Have a good one.
Thanks, man.
There he is. Russ Joy from Snow the Goalie, Crossing Broad, and thanks to him for stepping in and joining us here today. Anthony SanFilippo as well. I still don't like the tweet. I just, in a season where the objective was to lose, it's just such a fundamental thing where an objective can never be to lose. That's a hard nut for me to crack, because I think whenever you plug that scoreboard in, the objective is never to lose. Because if that's the objective, the organizational objective to lose, you're telling your players that it's okay to lose. And I just don't like that. That's a hot button thing for me, in case you don't know. So, but we'll see where it goes. Like I said to Russ, my expectations have not changed at all. It's 4 games. It's been a fun start. They've been scrappy and they've played honest and they've been resilient and they've worked hard. And I appreciate those things, but that's not going to necessarily change my opinion just yet. There's a lot of runway in front of us here. Eric messages in and says, you can't get your youngs better if you lose. He said loose, but you meant lose. I know. I just don't think that's ever good. But anyway, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and review. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube and subscribe to the podcast as well. Let me tell you about BetParks, because it's a great time to get on the BetParks Casino and Sportsbook app. Yeah, the casino part's great. Sportsbook's even greater because you can bet on everything. Same game parlays, live in-game betting, player performances on all the sports. Anything you can imagine, it is there for you. Easy to set up, fun to use. Look for the Stick to Hockey boost coming up. I think it's on Wednesday this week. By the way, they hit the boost this Wednesday night because TK scored with 1.9 seconds left. The boost was Flyers plus 1.5. The original line was plus 110. It got boosted to plus 250. And because TK scored to make it a 1-goal game with 1.9 seconds left, the boost hit. Beautiful. Hope you played it. If not, look for the boost this week and get on the BetParks app and download it. You do need to be present in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. You need to be over 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And thanks to Conquerville Subaru. Great weekend to jump down to the dealership. Check out the great inventory of certified used vehicles and a list of incoming Subaru models. down at Route 202 in Glen Mills, the beautiful Conquerville Subaru dealership. Great work in the community. As Russ pointed out, La Comunidad Hispana in Kennett Square is where they donate the coat. So I got a little lesson in Spanish on the program as well. Again, visit ConquervilleSubaru.com and check out the showroom on Route 202 in Glen Mills. Remember, Conquerville cares. Joey B, one last message. This is a great show. Enjoy your weekend, Jason. That's the message for you as well. Everybody, enjoy the weekend. Back-to-back Flyers games. Saturday night, they'll be in Nashville, 8 o'clock down there to take on the Preds. And then Sunday, they'll return home to take on the San Jose Sharks at Wells Fargo Center. So be plenty to talk about Monday with Anthony DeMarco. We have Anthony DeMarco on Monday, and then Wednesday next week, put a little note in your phone, our good buddy, Kevin Woodley from In Goal Magazine, the goalie guru, the goalie whisperer, is going to join us, talk about Carter Hart, talk about goaltending, and Kevin always provides great information. He's been on a bunch of times, and I know people really get a lot out of Kevin coming on. I was texting with him yesterday. So Woody's going to come on coming up on Wednesday. So we'll see who we have next Friday as well. But everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. And we shall talk to you coming up Monday on what will be a brand new edition of Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. Have a good